Okay, so today we're going to talk about absolute advantage and comparative advantage. Absolute advantage was brought about by Adam Smith, a known economist. He had a theory of the wealth of nations, which is basically that the cost differences will determine the patterns of international trade. These are based on natural and acquired resources, which means that it's more based on what you have. He also had the labor theory of value, which is the amount of labor required determines the cost of any good. So, the principle of absolute advantage came from this, which is that trade is beneficial when each country is a least cost producer of one of the goods being traded. So for an example, here we have the United States producing 5 bottles of wine and the United Kingdom producing 15 bottles of wine. The United States producing 20 yards of cloth and the United Kingdom producing 10 yards of cloth. So under this model, since the US can produce more cloth, we should produce cloth and trade it to the UK for wine, which the UK has greater capacity to produce. That seems pretty clear. But now we have the competing theory, which is comparative advantage, which is brought about by David Ricardo. He saw it as trade being mutually beneficial even if one country is more efficient than another in everything. We'll get to an example of that in a second. So the principle of comparative advantage is that each nation should specialize in production of those goods for which it is relatively more efficient with a lower opportunity cost. Opportunity cost being defined as the amount you give up to produce one more unit of goods. So here we have an example of the comparative advantage. In this situation, the United States is outproducing the United Kingdom in both wine and cloth. So according to absolute advantage, the theory of absolute advantage, the United States should just keep producing both for itself and not trade with the United Kingdom because they have the most wealth of nation, which is Adam Smith's theory. But, well, this basically backs that up. If we look at the graphical representation of this, we can see that it may not be as simple as we may have previously thought. So the production possibility schedule uses various combinations of two goods that a nation can produce using all available factor inputs. So right here, this is going to be important. This bottom line right here, represented by point A, is going to be autarky, which is defined as being the point at which a country would produce without any trading. So right now, with no trade, the United States would produce 40 units of autos and 40 units of wheat. That will be important later. The marginal rate of transformation is the amount of one good a country must sacrifice to get one more unit of another good, which is synonymous with opportunity cost. How much will you give up to get one more unit? And it's equal to the absolute value of the slope of the production possibility schedule. And these are the mathematical formulas for figuring that out. We will not go into that right now. So in this graph, the MRT equals 0.5 because wheat output falls by 20, as you can see right here, when auto rises by 40. So the marginal rate of transformation, or opportunity cost, for each nation will indicate the direction of trade. The marginal rate of transformation, or opportunity cost, can also indicate the potential gains from trade. To do this analysis, we have to begin to assume that opportunity cost will remain constant and that the benefits will be measured in terms of both improved production and consumption. So it helps both phases. So here we can see the gains from if we were to use the comparative advantage theory. So under autarky, we can see that the United States will produce 40 units of wheat and 40 units of autos. Now, when we go to the table right here, we can see this. The United States, before specialization, will produce 40 autos and 40 wheat. If we go back to Canada, we can see that Canada is producing 120 units of autos. Oh, excuse me. They're producing 40 units of autos and 80 units of wheat. So, what happens after we specialize? C is the line of what happens when there is trade. So if the United States were to focus on just automobiles, which they have the comparative advantage in, and we have Canada specializing in wheat because they have the comparative advantage in that. The reason that they have the comparative advantage, by the way, is that the United States has a more heavy capital economy. We can produce things like automobiles and things of that nature, where Canada has more farmland and they can produce more wheat without giving up as much. So, as you can see, if we both stick to ourselves, the total world output will be 80 autos and 120 wheat. You can see that on the line right here, because they will both be producing 40 units of autos, and they will both be producing, or they'll be producing 80 and 60 units of wheat, so 120. So after we specialize, you can see by the line right here that if we both focus on what we're good at, the United States will be able to produce 120 units of autos and Canada will be able to produce 160 units of wheat. So the world production will go up just by sticking to what we're good at and trading, even if the United States is better producing at both.